The massive alien ship moved through space like a crystal mountain floating in the darkness. Commander Zixtal stood at the viewing port, his body made of living crystal that changed colors with his emotions. Right now he glowed a soft blue, which meant he was excited. For 3 long years, his people had been watching the strange signals coming from the third planet in this solar system. The beings on that planet called themselves humans, and they seemed different from any other species the Galactic Confederation had ever found. Most intelligent life forms were either very strong with thick armor or had special powers like reading minds or controlling electricity. But these humans looked soft and weak, like they would break easily. Dr. Velinara walked up beside him, her tall, thin body swaying as she moved. She was from a plant-like species that got energy from light instead of eating food. Her green skin had patterns that showed she was thinking hard about something important. "The data makes no sense," she said in her musical voice. "These humans have no natural weapons at all. No claws, no poison, no thick skin to protect them. How did they become the top species on their planet?" Scientist Kethmer buzzed over to join them. He looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and 4 eyes. His people lived in perfect groups where everyone knew their job and never fought with each other. He had been studying the human broadcasts for months and was very confused. "They are strange," Kethmer agreed. "They walk on only 2 legs, which seems very unsteady. They're young or helpless for many years, unlike our larvae who can work within days of hatching. Yet somehow they built machines that can fly between planets." On the human ship, Captain Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee when the communication officer called him to the bridge. Jake was a calm man with gray hair and steady hands. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, mostly dealing with space pirates and asteroid mining disputes. "Sir, we're getting a signal from an unknown vessel, Lieutenant Carlos," Webb reported. "It's not using any communication system we recognize, but the computer managed to decode it." Jake read the message on his screen. It was simple and direct. The aliens wanted to meet with human representatives to begin peaceful contact between their species. Jake felt his heart speed up. This was the moment humanity had wondered about for centuries. They were not alone in the universe. He sent the message to Earth Command immediately. Within an hour, General Lisa Hayes called him directly. She was the head of all Earth's defense forces and one of the smartest people Jake had ever met. "Jake, I want you to handle the first meeting," she said. "Pick a small team and meet them at the coordinates they sent. But be careful. We don't know anything about these aliens, except that they seem friendly." Jake chose his team carefully. Dr. Ben Carter was Earth's best expert on alien life, even though he had never seen any real aliens before. Commander Amy Rogers was a tactical specialist who could spot danger quickly and think fast under pressure. Both were people Jake trusted completely. The alien ship was huge compared to Jake's patrol vessel. It looked like it was grown rather than built, with smooth curves and no sharp edges. Strange lights moved under its surface like slow lightning. When they got close, a smaller ship came out to meet them. The meeting place was a clear dome the aliens had built on a small asteroid. Inside was air that humans could breathe and artificial gravity that felt normal. Jake was impressed by how quickly they had prepared everything. When the airlock opened, Jake got his first look at real aliens. Commander Zixtal was the most beautiful and strange thing he had ever seen. The alien's crystal body caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music. "Welcome, humans," Zixtal said through a small device that translated his words. "We are honored to meet another species that has reached for the stars." Dr. Carter stepped forward and held out his hand. "We come in peace. This is an amazing day for both our peoples." Zixtal looked at the hand for a moment, then carefully reached out with one of his crystal appendages. Jake noticed how gently Ben controlled his grip, like he was holding something very delicate. The aliens were fascinated by everything about humans. They asked hundreds of questions about Earth, about human culture, about how people lived and worked together. Amy found herself explaining human government and laws, while Ben talked about science and art. Dr. Velinara seemed especially interested in human families. "You care for your young for so many years," she said with wonder. "Most species we know either abandon their offspring or keep them in group nurseries. But humans form these small units called families. Children need time to learn," Amy explained. "Human babies are born knowing almost nothing. They have to learn everything from walking to talking to thinking. It takes years of teaching. The aliens found this amazing. Their own young were born with most of the knowledge they needed already in their minds. The idea of starting with nothing and learning everything seemed both wonderful and terrifying to them." Kethmer was curious about human creativity. Ben showed him recordings of music, paintings, and poetry from Earth. The insect-like alien's 4 eyes grew wide as he listened to a symphony. "This serves no practical purpose," Kethmer buzzed in confusion. "Yet it affects your emotions strongly." "Why do humans create things that are not needed for survival?" "Because beauty makes life worth living," Ben answered. "Art helps us understand ourselves and connect with each other." The meeting lasted for several hours. Both sides shared information about their cultures and technologies. The aliens were impressed by human curiosity and creativity. The humans were amazed by the aliens' advanced science and peaceful nature. As the meeting ended, both sides agreed to more meetings in the future. They would exchange scientists and learn from each other. Jake felt like humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe. But as the alien ship prepared to leave, Dr. Velinara noticed something strange in the cultural files the humans had shared. There were references to something called military history and warfare. She made a note to study these topics more carefully later. The aliens waved goodbye with gestures of friendship. The humans returned to Earth with exciting news about peaceful contact with advanced alien civilizations. Neither side realized that this first meeting was just the beginning of a much more complicated relationship. In the depths of space, the alien research vessel began its journey home, carrying with it the first pieces of a puzzle that would soon terrify the entire Galactic Confederation. Dr. Velinara spent the next few weeks studying the cultural data that the humans had shared with them. She worked in her laboratory aboard the crystal ship, surrounded by floating screens that showed human art, music, and literature. The more she learned about these strange bipedal creatures, the more questions she had about them. The humans seemed to have an unusual relationship with something they called conflict. Most of the stories they shared contained struggles between different groups of people. Their literature was full of tales about heroes fighting against enemies, nations battling other nations, and individuals overcoming violent challenges. Commander Zixtal visited her laboratory to see what she had discovered. His crystal body was glowing a curious yellow color as he looked at the human data floating around the room. "They are very emotional beings," Velinara said as she pointed to a human painting. "Look at this artwork. It shows warriors in battle, but the artist painted it to look beautiful rather than frightening. They seem to find beauty in things that other species would consider disturbing." On Earth, Dr. Ben Carter was having similar conversations with his research team. The aliens had shared their own cultural materials, and the differences were striking. Alien art focused on harmony, cooperation, and peaceful growth. Their stories were about communities working together to solve problems, not individuals fighting against odds. "It's interesting," Ben told his assistant, Dr. Patricia Mills. "They don't seem to have any concept of competitive sports, adventure, stories, or even simple conflict resolution through confrontation. Everything in their culture is about agreement and peaceful solutions. Amy Rogers was reviewing the alien technology data when she noticed something odd. The aliens had incredibly advanced ships and tools, but none of their technology seemed designed for defense. Their ships had no weapons, no armor, no shielding against attacks. Even their exploration vessels were completely defenseless. It's like they've never considered that someone might want to hurt them, Amy told Jake during their weekly report call. Their whole civilization seems built on the assumption that everyone will be friendly and cooperative. Back on the alien ship, scientist Kethmer was analyzing human physical capabilities. The data showed that humans were much stronger and faster than they appeared. Their bones were designed to handle impacts and stress. Their muscles could produce sudden bursts of power when needed. Most interesting of all, humans seemed capable of ignoring pain and injury in emergency situations. Look at this medical data, Kethmer showed his colleagues. Humans can function normally even when injured. Their bodies produce chemicals that block pain and increase strength during dangerous situations. Why would a peaceful species need such capabilities? Dr. Velinara found the answer in human historical records. The files mentioned something called wars, but the descriptions were confusing. According to the data, wars were large organized conflicts between groups of humans. But the records were incomplete and seemed to focus on the peaceful resolutions rather than the actual fighting. They mentioned something called the World Wars, she told Commander Zixtel. Apparently, these were conflicts that involved most of their planet. But the files mainly discuss how these wars ended and led to better cooperation between human nations. Zixtel was puzzled by this information. In his species history, conflicts were resolved through shared consciousness experiences where all parties could feel each other's emotions and reach understanding. The idea of organized violence between intelligent beings was almost impossible for him to understand. On Earth, General Lisa Hayes was meeting with the Global Defense Council to discuss the alien contact. The aliens seemed genuinely peaceful, and their technology could help humanity advance by centuries. But Lisa had spent her career preparing for threats, and she noticed some concerning details in the alien data. They have no military forces at all, she reported to the council. No weapons, no defenses, no concept of security. Their entire civilization operates on complete trust. It's admirable, but also makes them incredibly vulnerable. The council members discussed what this meant for Earth's relationship with the aliens. If the galaxy was full of peaceful species like these, then humanity's military forces might no longer be necessary. Perhaps humans could finally move beyond their history of conflict and join a truly peaceful galactic community. Dr. Carter received a communication request from the aliens asking for more detailed historical information. They were particularly interested in something called international relations and conflict resolution mechanisms. Ben was happy to share information about the United Nations, peace treaties, and diplomatic processes. However, he decided not to include detailed information about actual warfare. The aliens seemed genuinely peaceful, and Ben thought it might be better to focus on humanity's progress toward peace rather than its violent past. He prepared files that showed how humans had learned to resolve differences through negotiation and cooperation. Dr. Velinara received the new human data and found it fascinating but incomplete. The humans clearly had experience with conflict, but they seemed reluctant to discuss the details. Their historical records mentioned military, academies, and defense forces, but provided no information about what these institutions actually did. There are gaps in their cultural data, she reported to Zixtel. They reference institutions and concepts related to conflict, but they don't explain what these things are. It's as if they're deliberately avoiding certain topics. Kethmer made an interesting discovery while analyzing human entertainment media. Many of their movies and books featured detailed depictions of violence and combat. The humans seemed to enjoy stories about fighting war, and physical conflict, even though they claimed to be a peaceful species. Why would peaceful beings create entertainment about violence? He asked his colleagues. Our people create stories about cooperation and growth, but humans seem fascinated by conflict and competition. Commander Zixtal decided to send another communication to the humans, requesting clarification about these contradictions. He asked specifically about human military forces and their purpose in a peaceful society. Jake Morrison received the alien message and felt a moment of concern. The aliens were asking direct questions about Earth's military capabilities and history. He consulted with General Hayes about how to respond. Tell them the truth, Hayes decided. Our military exists to protect Earth and maintain peace. We don't use it for conquest or aggression anymore. If they're going to be our partners, they need to understand how human society actually works. Jake prepared a response explaining that human military forces existed primarily for defense and peacekeeping. He included information about how Earth's various armies work together to prevent conflicts and protect civilian populations. When the aliens received this message, they felt their first real moment of concern about their new human friends. The idea that an intelligent species needed organized forces specifically trained for violence was deeply disturbing to creatures who had never known anything but peace. Dr. Velinara saved all the human military data in a special secure file. Something told her that understanding this aspect of human culture was going to be very important for the future relationship between their species. Dr. Velinara could not sleep, which was unusual for her species. Plant-like beings normally rested peacefully during their dark cycles, but her mind kept returning to the strange gaps in human cultural data. She decided to use her advanced research tools to dig deeper into the human information networks. The aliens had technology that could access public databases from across human space. What Dr. Velinara found when she looked beyond the carefully selected files the humans had shared made her green skin turn a sickly yellow color. Commander Zixtal, she called urgently over the ship's communication system. You need to see this. Immediately. Zixtal arrived at her laboratory within minutes, his crystal body flickering with concern. Scientist Kethmer buzzed in behind him, his 4 eyes already wide with worry at Velinara's tone. I accessed their public historical archives, Velinara said, her voice shaking. The humans didn't lie to us, but they showed us only a tiny part of their real history. Look at this. She activated a holographic display that showed a timeline of human civilization. Red markers indicated something called major conflicts throughout their history. There were hundreds of them, stretching back thousands of years. What are these red marks? Zixtal asked, though something deep in his consciousness already feared the answer. Wars, Velinara whispered. Organized violence between groups of humans. But not just small disputes over resources. Look at the scale of some of these conflicts. She highlighted an event labeled World War II. The data showed that this single conflict involved most of the human planet and resulted in the deaths of over 50 million beings. Zixtal's crystal form went completely dark with shock. 50 million. He repeated slowly. That's more beings than exist in our entire star system. How is this possible? Kethmer was studying the technical details of human warfare. His insect-like mind was good at processing complex information quickly, but what he found made him wish he couldn't understand it so well. They didn't just fight with primitive weapons. He buzzed in horror. They created machines specifically designed to kill as many beings as possible. Look at these devices they call tanks, bombers, and submarines. The aliens learned that humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare. They had created weapons that could kill from great distances, poisons that could eliminate entire armies, and strategies that involved destroying not just enemy soldiers, but entire cities full of civilian populations. This entry mentions something called the Holocaust, Velinara said, her voice barely audible. It describes the systematic murder of 6 million humans by other humans, based solely on their ancestry and beliefs. Commander Zixtal felt something he had never experienced before in his long life. It was a cold terror that seemed to freeze his crystal structure from the inside. His people had never encountered a species capable of such organized cruelty toward their own kind. On Earth, Dr. Ben Carter was working late in his office when his computer system detected unauthorized access to historical databases. Someone with very advanced technology was downloading massive amounts of information about human history, particularly military history. He immediately called Amy Rogers, who ran Earth's information security protocols. Amy, someone is accessing our historical archives. The access patterns suggest it's the aliens. Amy felt her stomach drop. The aliens were learning about humanity's real past, not the carefully edited version they had been shown. What kind of information are they accessing? Everything, Ben said grimly. Military history, wars, weapons development, casualty statistics. They're getting the full picture of what humans are capable of. Amy knew this moment would come eventually. It was impossible to hide humanity's violent past forever, especially from beings with advanced technology. She called General Hayes immediately. General, the aliens have discovered our military history. They're accessing public databases and learning about our wars. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. How bad is it? They're seeing everything. World wars, ancient battles, weapons development, casualty figures. If I were them, I'd be terrified. Back on the alien ship, Dr. Velinara continued her horrifying research. She found detailed records of human weapons that seemed impossible to believe. Devices called nuclear bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Chemical weapons that killed through the air itself. Biological weapons that used diseases as tools of warfare. They created weapons of mass destruction, she reported to her colleagues. Devices capable of ending all life on their planet, and they actually used some of them. Scientist Kethmer discovered something even more disturbing. Humans had not abandoned these terrible weapons after learning their power. Instead, they had built thousands of them and pointed them at each other for decades in something called the Cold War. They held their entire species hostage to prevent warfare, he buzzed in disbelief. They threatened to destroy their own planet rather than allow their enemies to win. What kind of beings think this way? Commander Zixtal was studying human military organization. He learned that humans had created entire institutions dedicated to the study of warfare. They had schools that taught young humans how to fight, universities that researched better ways to wage war, and industries that existed solely to create weapons. It's not just that they fought wars, he said to his crew. They made warfare into a science. They study it, teach it, and improve it constantly. Even during their peaceful periods, they continue preparing for the next conflict. Dr. Velinara found records of human conflicts that lasted for decades or even centuries. The 100 Years' War had continued for longer than most species took. To develop space travel, humans seemed capable of maintaining organized violence across multiple generations. Look at this conflict in a place called Vietnam, she showed her colleagues. It lasted for 20 years. Humans sent their young to fight and die in jungles on the other side of their planet, for reasons that even they couldn't clearly explain. The aliens began to understand that human civilization was built on a foundation of constant conflict. Their art celebrated warriors, their stories glorified battles, and their heroes were often those who had succeeded in warfare. Kethmer discovered that humans had created rules for warfare, which seemed like a contradiction. How could organized violence have rules? But when he studied these Geneva Conventions, He realized they existed because human warfare had become so terrible that even humans themselves were horrified by what they could do. They needed rules to limit their own cruelty, he reported. They had to create laws to prevent themselves from being too efficient at killing. As the night cycle continued, the three alien researchers sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the evidence of humanity's capacity for violence. They had contacted what they thought was a peaceful species of curious explorers. Instead, they had discovered the most successful predator species in galactic history, one that had turned warfare into an art form and killing into a science. And now these creatures had access to space travel and knowledge of other intelligent species. Dr. Velinara began composing an urgent report to the Galactic Confederation. The galaxy needed to know what they were dealing with before it was too late. Scientist Kethmer had not left his research station for 3 days. His 6 arms moved constantly across multiple data screens as he dug deeper into human military databases. What he discovered made his insect-like body tremble with a fear he had never known existed. The breakthrough came when he managed to access what humans called classified military files. The security was strong, but alien technology was far more advanced than human computer systems. What Kethmer found inside these secret files changed everything the aliens thought they knew about their new human friends. Dr. Velinara, he buzzed. Urgently, you must see this immediately. The humans have been hiding something far worse than we imagined. Velinara rushed to his station, her plant-like body swaying with nervous energy. Commander Zixtal followed close behind, his crystal form flickering between colors as his emotions shifted rapidly. What did you find? Velinara asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Kethmer activated a holographic display that showed detailed human military training videos. The aliens watched in silent horror as human soldiers moved through combat exercises with deadly precision. These were not the clumsy, fragile creatures they had met during first contact. They trained constantly for warfare, Kethmer explained. Even during their so-called peaceful periods, humans maintained massive military forces that practiced killing techniques every single day. The training videos showed humans learning hundreds of different ways to eliminate enemies. They practiced with weapons, with their bare hands, and with improvised tools that could be found anywhere. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy the challenge of becoming more efficient killers. Commander Zixtal watched a group of human Special Forces soldiers moving silently through a simulated enemy base. They eliminated multiple targets without making a sound, using techniques that seemed impossible for bipedal creatures. How do they move like that? He whispered. They are completely silent, perfectly coordinated, and utterly lethal. It's like watching death itself take physical form. Dr. Velinara discovered files about human psychological warfare. This was a concept completely foreign to alien minds, the idea of destroying enemies, mentally and emotionally rather than physically. Humans had developed techniques to break their opponent's will to fight without ever touching them. They can defeat enemies by making them afraid, she said in amazement. They use fear itself as a weapon. They spread terror to make their opponents surrender before fighting even begins. The aliens learned that humans had created military units, specifically designed for what they called special operations. These were small groups of highly trained humans who could infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, sabotage equipment, and eliminate specific targets with surgical precision. Kethmer found training manuals for these special forces units. The level of skill required was beyond anything the aliens had encountered in other species. Humans trained for years to master skills like silent movement, precision shooting, hand-to-hand combat, explosives handling, and psychological manipulation. Look at this, he showed his colleagues, a manual titled Advanced Combat Techniques. They have documented over 15,000 different methods for killing other beings. They study these techniques like we study mathematics or stellar mechanics. Commander Zixtal discovered something even more disturbing. Human military forces did not just train for conventional warfare. They prepared for every possible type of conflict: urban combat, jungle warfare, desert operations, mountain fighting, underwater missions, and even combat in space. They adapt their killing methods to any environment, he reported to his crew. There is no place in the universe where a human cannot find a way to eliminate threats. They are the perfect predator. Species. The aliens found records of human military academies where young humans spent years learning the science of warfare. These institutions taught strategy, tactics, logistics, intelligence gathering, and leadership skills specifically for managing large-scale conflicts. Dr. Velinara accessed the curriculum from a place called West Point Military Academy. The courses included titles like The Art of War, Strategic Planning, Combat Leadership, and Military History. Humans literally studied warfare as an academic subject. They don't just fight instinctively, she realized. They analyze every aspect of conflict and continuously improve their methods. Each generation of human warriors is more effective than the last because they learn from previous battles. Scientist Kethmer made the most chilling discovery of all. Human military technology had not stopped advancing after their so-called peaceful period began. Instead, they had developed even more sophisticated weapons and continued researching new ways to wage war. They have weapons now that make their historical nuclear bombs look primitive, he buzzed in terror. Precision-guided missiles that can strike targets anywhere on their planet, aircraft that cannot be detected by sensors, and communication systems that allow perfect coordination between military units across vast distances. The aliens learned that human military forces practice something called joint operations, where different branches of their armed forces work together seamlessly. Land, sea, air, and space forces could combine their capabilities to create overwhelming tactical advantages. Commander Zixtal found planning documents for hypothetical conflicts against unknown alien species. The humans had already considered the possibility of warfare with extraterrestrial beings and developed preliminary strategies for such encounters. They were preparing to fight us before they even knew we existed, he said in shock. Human military planners automatically assume that any new contact might become an enemy. They think about warfare constantly, even during peaceful times. Dr. Velinara discovered the most terrifying truth of all. The human capacity for violence was not diminishing as their civilization advanced. Instead, they were becoming more efficient and deadly with each passing year. Modern human soldiers were faster, stronger, better trained, and more lethal than any warriors in their species' history. They had access to weapons that could eliminate targets with perfect accuracy from incredible distances, and they possessed communication technology that allowed perfect coordination during combat operations. We made a terrible mistake, Velinara said as the full scope of human military capability became clear. We assumed that intelligence leads to peace, but humans proved that assumption wrong. They have used their intelligence to become the most dangerous predators in galactic history. The three alien researchers sat in stunned silence as they realized the magnitude of their discovery. They had made contact with a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing and showed no signs of abandoning their warrior nature. Kethmer began composing an emergency transmission to the Galactic Confederation High Command. The message would be simple but urgent. Humanity represented an unprecedented threat to galactic peace, and immediate action was required. As he worked on the message, human patrol ships continued their routine operations around Earth, unaware that their new alien friends were preparing to warn the entire galaxy about the terrifying species that had just emerged from the Sol system. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council had never been called with such urgency in over 12,000 years of peaceful civilization. Representatives from 847 member species gathered in the massive crystal chamber that floated in neutral space between the major star systems. High Counselor Thranks of the ancient sage species called the session to order. His people had lived for millions of years and had never encountered a situation like this one. His voice carried the weight of eons as he addressed the assembled delegates. "Fellow beings of the Confederation," he began, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber, "we face an unprecedented crisis. 3 days ago, we received an emergency report from our first contact team regarding the species known as humans. What they discovered challenges everything we believed about the nature of intelligent life." Commander Zixtal stepped forward to present his findings. His crystal body had lost all its usual color and appeared almost transparent with fear. Dr. Velanara and Scientist Kathmer flanked him, their own forms showing similar signs of distress. "Honored delegates," Zixtal began, "we have discovered that the human species represents something we have never encountered before. They are not simply a violent species that achieved intelligence. They are an intelligent species that has perfected violence beyond our worst nightmares." The chamber filled with nervous sounds as representatives from hundreds of species shifted uncomfortably. The concept of a truly dangerous intelligent species was foreign to beings who had evolved in peaceful galactic civilization. Dr. Velanara activated the holographic display system and began showing the evidence they had gathered. Images of human warfare throughout history filled the chamber. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as the scope of human violence became clear. They have fought over 25,000 documented wars in their recorded history, Velanara reported. Not territorial disputes or resource conflicts, but organized campaigns of destruction involving millions of their own kind. Representative Qualish from the Peaceful Coalition raised a tentacle nervously. "Surely these are ancient behaviors that they have outgrown. Many species have primitive violent periods in their early development." Scientist Kathmer buzzed forward to respond. "That is what we hope to find, but the evidence shows the opposite. Human military capability has increased dramatically in recent centuries. They are more lethal now than ever before in their history." The holographic display showed modern human military training exercises. Special Forces soldiers moved through combat scenarios with fluid precision that seemed impossible for organic beings. Their weapons handled with the same natural ease that other species showed when using simple tools. They trained for warfare with a dedication that we apply to art or philosophy, Kathmer continued. Human children play games that simulate combat. Their entertainment focuses on conflict and competition. Even their peaceful activities like sports are stylized forms of combat. High Counselor Threnji studied the data with growing concern. What about their technology? Do they possess weapons that could threaten other star systems? Commander Zixtal dimmed further as he answered. Their current weapons could devastate any planet in the Confederation. But more concerning is their rate of advancement. They improve their military technology exponentially while maintaining massive research programs focused specifically on new methods of warfare. The delegates began to understand the true scope of the threat. This was not just another species with violent tendencies. Humans represented a fundamental challenge to the peaceful order that had governed the galaxy for millennia. Council Member Sithara from the Harmony Collective spoke up. "Perhaps we are overreacting. They seemed peaceful during first contact. Maybe they have truly changed their ways." Dr. Velanara shook her head sadly. "We analyzed their current military expenditures. Even during their most peaceful period in history, humans spend more resources on warfare preparation than most of our species spend on their entire civilizations. They maintained standing armies of millions, weapons stockpiles that could destroy planets, and research programs that continuously developed new ways to kill. The evidence continued to mount as the alien researchers presented their findings. Humans had developed weapons that could strike targets across interplanetary distances. Their military forces trained for combat in every possible environment, including space itself. Most terrifying of all, they had already begun theoretical planning for potential conflicts with alien species. They were preparing to fight us before they knew we existed, Zixtal reported. Human military doctrine assumes that any unknown contact might become hostile. They automatically consider warfare as a solution to diplomatic problems. Representative Nethala from the Crystal Gardens asked the question that everyone was thinking. What do we do about them? We cannot uninvent their contact with galactic civilization. High Counselor Threnx called for a brief recess as the council members consulted with their home governments. The communication channels between the chamber and hundreds of star systems buzzed with urgent discussions about the human problem. When the session resumed, the debate was intense. Some delegates argued for immediate military action to contain the human threat before they developed faster-than-light travel. Others suggested diplomatic isolation, cutting off all contact and pretending humans did not exist. We could quarantine their entire star system, suggested Representative Korth from the Protective Union. Establish a barrier that prevents them from leaving their solar system until they prove they have abandoned their violent nature. But Council Member Veltosh from the Ancient Wisdom sect disagreed. Any aggressive action toward humans might trigger exactly the kind of response we fear. If they are truly as dangerous as the evidence suggests, we do not want to give them a reason to consider us enemies. The debate continued for hours as 847 different species tried to find a solution to a problem they had never faced before. How do you deal with a species that combines advanced intelligence with an unprecedented capacity for violence? Finally, High Counselor Threnx called for a final vote. The options were simple but stark: immediate quarantine, diplomatic isolation, or careful engagement with extensive monitoring and restrictions. The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Confederation, but with unprecedented restrictions. They would be classified as a protected observation species, with the protection applying to everyone else rather than to humans themselves. As the session ended, Threnx made a private entry in the official records. Today we learned that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations may not be its most dangerous inhabitants. We have discovered that sometimes the most lethal predator is the one that has learned to smile and speak of peace while keeping its claws sharp. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison completed another routine patrol, unaware that the fate of his entire species had just been decided by creatures who now viewed humanity as the most terrifying force in galactic history.